Hello, you haven't seen much of me today, and it's actually 11:59, which means there's 1 minute left of today. And I didn't really have much to say today to the camera. It was more of just a reset day for me. But there's something that's been on my mind quite a lot, and that is the concept of empathy. Now, empathy is something I find quite deep and something that I thought that I understood, but I don't. At least in my brain. It sounds weird to be able to separate this. And the first thing I thought about when I started to, I think I experienced empathy today. I felt it, and it made me start to think about what it actually is. And there's something I learned that's quite cool in philosophy is, and it might seem so obvious when you look back, but it wasn't for me at least. It's how do you approach something like empathy when you're trying to understand it on a deeper level? Now, philosophy does this by branching into a few different things. So, when one starts to think about these concepts such as empathy, where there is effectively no answer, like I can give you an example of something that I would deem as an empathetic situation, but I can't tell you explicitly what empathy is. And if you say, no, Bianca, you can say what empathy is, I will tell you that I think you're wrong. I don't know what it is, but I think it can be many things. It's not just one thing. And when it comes to these type of multifaceted, very complicated, innately human things, philosophy does a very good job of breaking it down. Now, I didn't know how to approach these kind of things before I studied philosophy a little bit more formally. And it's what made me respect the field of philosophy so much. And it acknowledges that there are no answers, but there are different angles in which one can approach certain things. Now, philosophers use big words, and big words are necessary sometimes because the little words don't do it justice. But if we had to look at empathy, or at least how I thought about it, you've got epistemology, and this is asking the question of like, in order for someone, the colloquial understanding or the normal human understanding of what empathy is that it's not just I can see that you're struggling or I can see your take on this situation. It's also I can see it, I acknowledge it, but I also feel it in myself. Like I see that you're sad, but I also feel sad for the situation. Whereas sympathy is that I acknowledge that you're feeling sad. So philosophers would take this concept of epistemology to be like, what do I actually know about why you are sad? And how does that resonate with me? Is it the same? Would I feel the same sadness as you in that situation? Or am I just projecting my own sadness onto this situation so that I can try and understand yours? I don't know if you're getting my drift here. It's the concept of, if you look at it like, I see blue or I see this as yellow and I define that as yellow, but you may see it as purple, but we just have the same name for this color here. And I think that can be said for the same of this type of emotion or this notion of empathy. And it's a very unique way to look at it because it's like the whole concept of empathy is to acknowledge the other. But if you are just projecting your own, does it break down what empathy is? Then the next thought of it is you can look at it from an ethical perspective, and that's kind of where this bleeds in, where you've got almost the moral obligation to be empathetic empathetic for others, with others, to others. And the question is, should empathy lead us? Like, oh, we feel sorry for these type of people, or we see that this is a problem. Um, and then it also brings like these weird. The only thing that I can think of right now, which is quite extreme, but you have to forgive me because it's 5 minutes past 12 now. But I had a debate about this when I was in Slovenia last week, is like female genital mutilation. And I don't want to go into the greater detail of it because it's a very sensitive thing and I'm not qualified enough to talk about it. But we were having a discussion where people were like, it's completely wrong and it needs to stop. And I agree from my Western perspective, yes, but you can't take away the opinions of the people in that village or the reasons why they're potentially doing it or how the women feel about it, because there could be an argument, and I'm not saying that this is my argument, and I'm not saying that it's right, but there could be an argument that in order to be part of the tribe, to be part of something, this is how it goes and they kind of accept it. This is a bad example because it's very sensitive. Maybe I shouldn't have used this example. But you kind of get what I'm saying, is that sometimes you have this Western ideology that's imposed onto indigenous cultures or villages or whatever, where it doesn't necessarily seem like it doesn't have to be right for them, even though it's right for you. And then this is the whole concept of empathy. If you look, you're like, oh my gosh, this can't happen. This is terrible. If I was in your shoes, I think this would be really bad idea. Therefore, we should not do it. However, is that just taking my ideas and imposing them onto others through this cover-up of I'm being nice, I'm being empathetic? So the ethics, there's two sides to the ethics discussion as well. And then the other branch, I guess you can look at it, is from an ontological perspective. And that's kind of like, the definition is like the nature of being, or like the self. And I've spoken before a lot about intimacy. But you can also employ the idea that there's a self, and this is me, and then there's others, and I know where I end and others begin. But in empathy, you could also look at it at being you inviting the other one into your like boundary of yourself, and you're trying to genuinely feel what they are feeling, and which means that they're in your bubble of self now through this notion of empathy. And it then changes the question of where do I end and where do you begin in the experience of empathy. And all three of these ways, like ontology, ethics, and then epistemology, all different ways to look at this concept of empathy. And there's no wrong or right answer. There's just better arguments for either one. And I think what I want to say here is it's super cool. And I think very important that we look at things like this from all of these different angles. I think I don't know, I was going to say, I think it makes us more empathetic to others to be able to dissect topics in a way, but it also makes you kind of annoying at parties. Certain parties, I guess. But if you wanted a little bit of an insight onto Bianca's brain at midnight on a Saturday night, this is what she thinks about. And it doesn't nullify my feeling of empathy for, or my experience of empathy today, but it helps me as a human understand my experience and the connection of others a little bit deeper, or at least from my own perspective, or at least what I want to believe it is. But sometimes, when you think about it too much, it takes away like this like magic of it. I think I'm thinking like I'm talking like I'm being very profound, but I think I'll watch this again and be like, "Oh, Bianca, calm down. What are you talking about magic?" But I feel like there is something there. It's something that like I can only use the word magic because I don't have another word for describing this like human condition that we all, it's something in my PhD that I'm struggling to quantify a lot, because technology acts in a way where a chatbot can seem like it's empathetic, and I can create a definition in which one could confidently say that the chatbot is being empathetic. However, from all of these other angles, one would say that it's not. And I personally struggle with this like conflict in my head. Because in science and in a scientific paper, it will make sense, but like, or I can make it make sense. And I hate that I can make it make sense. But sometimes there's no other way. It's crazy when things have no answers. And then we try and emulate them with technology. And we get it right. Or wrong sometimes. But like, the crazy one is when it feels like it's real enough. And then you say, but it's doing it. And then you say, how? And then we say, I don't know. Because I can't define it. And if I can't define it, I can't find it. And if I can't find it, I can't tell you how it's doing it. And that's what makes this like idea of artificial intelligence so scary. Because it does some stuff that we don't even know how it does it, but it does it. But it's also cool because I think we could potentially figure out how it does it, and it will give us more enlightenment, it will enlighten our understanding of the human condition and how these things work. Anyway, I'm gonna stop talking right now. I need to go shower because I feel exhausted. So there's no thought experiment. This is just this is just some raw, uncut, genuinely what goes through my brain a lot of the time. And I have these discussions with my head. It does feel like it. It feels like there's two little, what is the word? Homunculi, or two little things going at it in my brain being like, what about this? What about that? What about that? I'm still not satisfied with my answers. Anyway, I'll go think about them in the shower. This was a long rant. I guess I'll see you tomorrow.